Genesis, right? We know what Genesis says, right? It's pretty clear. It says that God created male and female, right? Now, what I'm talking about in this article that I'm passing around is one of the main things in our culture that's happening as we remove the Bible from schools, we remove it in universities and teach otherwise. We see our entertainment industry and our education industry and our media moving towards what we call postmodernism, which we studied in book 1. You're going to see more and more of this push against Christianity and what truth is. Has anybody watched the video, What is a Woman? Yeah, it's a good video to watch by Matt Walsh if you get a chance. Really eye-opening to see him having conversations with university professors. In this case, we have Dr. Patrick Yensa at the University of Tennessee. He teaches a humanities and gender identity class. Okay, so just think about our universities now teaching gender identity and transgenderism in our universities. We're paying for this, okay? So over here, when he asked in the interview this professor, why is truth uncomfortable? Because he said, don't use the word truth. This professor told him, don't use the word truth because truth is uncomfortable. And when he asked him, his answer was, because it's transphobic. You keep invoking the word truth, it's condescending and rude. Okay? What he means by that is, come back over here and look at postmodernism. This is what has taken our culture by storm in our universities. The first point is, Christianity is about objective truth, there's a single truth. Postmodernism is subjective, multiple truths. People can have multiple truths about any topic. Point number 2 is, in postmodernism, they're skeptical of claims to be valid for all groups, cultures, traditions, and races. A truth cannot be comprehensive, covering everyone. You have to allow for relative truths for each person, and you have to respect that. So when someone says, I feel like a man, and they're a woman, they're right. It's true. You know why? Because that's their truth. The only way you can get there is to abandon the Bible. It's the only way you can get there. So when we sit here and hear this and we go, oh, this is terrible, think about the fact that outside of church, this is how people think. So it's okay in church to have sermons and classes, but so what? What do we do with it? Our culture is fine with us staying in our church and staying at home at our dinner table. Just don't bring it into culture. That's what's happening. The minute you do, look how bad it's getting. Now you have university professors calling people out as transphobic because you hate people who think this way. When did we ever say we hate someone? What we're saying is truth is truth, and we're pointing it out. The third point is it's all about interpretation, right? Reality exists through our interpretation of the world, and each person has their own interpretation, and you need to value that.
Wasn't it Pilate that said, what is truth? Did they have the same problem back then? They didn't even know what truth
Well, we
meant?
had a whole class on that, right? Does anybody remember that? We got into what that means in Rome at the time. So yes. So what's happening here, though, is what you're facing now. When you turn on the TV and you see these things and you go, oh, that's just crazy. How can you call a person illegally coming into our country as deserving of Social Security and Medicare? They're not an American citizen. Well, yes, they are. We feel sad for them. We feel bad. We need to help them. It's like, what does that got to do with it? They're not an American. I can't help everyone. How do I distinguish, right? Well, there's laws. Laws exist. So this is the foundation for what you're seeing today. It just took over 100 years to get there. This has been a slow burn, and nobody's paying attention. Christians are not paying attention. When Darwin came in 1850s, when our universities started moving away from objective truth into subjective, and we start teaching it that way, right? over time, people are graduating, more people are taking important jobs that are postmoderns, that reject the Bible, and you end up now with this situation where you have so many people indoctrinated, and we're sitting there looking at it going, what's going on? Well, because we're asleep.
Yeah.
We're not saying anything.
I was going to say the difference between Pilate's time and our time is that this is more of a worldwide phenomenon, but it's so stark in America because of our founding. That's why it's very stark here.
Well, that's a good point.
It's a moving away from where we were founded.
This is such a good point. Now, in order to convince your average American who doesn't go to church that this is true, you have to bash the Constitution and you have to attack the founders. See, the founders were slave owners, bad people. We have to get rid of them and come up with a new way of looking at things. So if you have no knowledge of our founders and you have no knowledge of the history of this country, it's easy to watch TV and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. But this is what's happening. We move away from biblical truth, it gets replaced with this, and people like us are standing around going, I'm at a business party and I'm the only one making any sense here, right? So if you don't grow in your knowledge of Jesus Christ, and if you're not interested in sharing him, your best day is in church on Sunday for your class and home alone with your family. Because it's going to get worse if we don't start speaking up. Look at the congressional hearing with Hawley. In the article you can read it, it's a lot longer, you can read it. But basically, this is a UC Berkeley professor. Bridges is asking Hawley a question. Do you believe men can get pregnant? His answer, no, I don't think men can get pregnant. So you are denying that trans people exist. Thank you.
So something that's kind of an overarching issue around all of this is a few weeks back you mentioned how the Romans had a problem with Christianity from a PR standpoint to where they would go out and rescue babies that were being left in the wilderness. Today we have sort of a similar issue, but it's reversed. The reason why postmodern thinking has taken over so much is they have one singular goal in mind, be accepting of everyone, regardless of what it is. And Christianity right now has this problem to where we have two split views on this. We have people who want to be accepting of everyone and sharing the love of Christ, and then at the same time we have people who want to spread hate and say that God hates these people, telling them they're going to go to hell. Whenever these people that want to try to come to Christ, we try to alienate them, and we're not accepting of them coming into our church. So in a way it's kind of weird to where that group is more accepting than we are and have more love for each other than we do for them.
Awesome. You're making a great point. Now, take what he's saying with what Jesus said in the book of John. He says, you know what? Realize that when they hate you, they really hate me. They don't hate you. Now, what he was just explaining, he was saying, you know, it's almost like in the church you have two groups. You have a more progressive church that's saying, I don't understand. Why aren't we loving these people and bringing them in? And another group saying, no, they need to be judged, and they actually are hateful. There's churches that are going to come out there and blast people, and they think they're doing it in God's name. Now, think about how our culture views the God of the Old Testament. What do they normally say about him? All he wants to do is wipe people out and don't listen to him, right? So you got a view where people, when they interpret the Bible, they go, well, look at the God of the Old Testament, how bad he is. But then you have over here, when you study the Old Testament, it goes, wait a minute. All he talks about is how much he loves people and how he brings people into a saving faith. Actually, Jesus is worse than the God of the Old Testament. He's saying this idea of adultery, dude, you look at a woman with thought of it, you belong in hell. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, I thought I had to do it. No, you don't even have to do it. You just got to look at her, right? So, what are you seeing when you see these two views? Why is it we tend to align with just one of them? How come those two can't come together? Yeah, how come they can't come together?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing you have to do is define what love is, because love is not, so the progressive love is I'm going to accept you, I'm going to accept what you're doing, God is wanting to find love. You have this slogan, love is love. Well, that's circular. Tell me what love is. You know, but then of course you have people who are on the extreme and they are spouting, I hate you. Well, see, that's still not biblical. But you have to point out the sin, but you have to help that person to understand that Jesus Christ is. So, you know, it's not one or the other.
I just think, though, that all this is true, but this, I do this all the time, so you guys get mad at me. That argument won't work. It's true, but it won't work. Our culture's too far gone. Here's a common sense one. I have my kids sit around the dinner table. You guys like cocaine, right? I know you do. Well, I'm against it. I don't think you should do cocaine. It's bad for you. But you know what? I love you so much, do it as much as you want. Is that loving my kids? Why not? It's gonna kill them. It's bad, right? So why do I put rules and raise my kids according to certain standards? Why do I do that? Because I love them. Why are we having trouble here with the God of the Bible? Right?
Maybe people don't cooperate or think discipline and love is the same.
Yeah, and in a way, they think they can't put it together, although they know it. People know it, right?
Isn't that an understanding of the word love to begin with? Because just ask 10 people what their definition of love is. They all come up with some crazy stuff.
Right.
They don't know what that word means.
Yeah, and a lot of times, if you want to find parents or even people in your church, when a pastor says they love you, but they don't answer your phone calls, or when you're struggling, they're never there for you, how do you feel? They don't love you.
Right.
Or when you're doing something you know is wrong, and a pastor looks the other way because he doesn't want to ruffle feathers, he doesn't love you. Because he's not telling you.
I mean,
He lets you do whatever you want.
teenagers to young adults. So we have 2 children, 30 and 29. So we've been through the whole gamut, and we're grandparents now. But there was a time in that 17 to 25-year-old span where your children they honestly don't believe that you love them because of the boundaries and things that you put in their life to protect them. And they don't realize what that is until they get into that next stage of life, and then it hits them.
I'm going to disagree on that one a little bit. They know you love them, they just don't like it, right?
That's true.
Because you feed them, you're in your house, they know that, they just don't like it. So, Devin, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, you're talking about the church being split in two, some churches focusing on the Lord's judgment and others focusing on the Lord's love. And with the quote-unquote acceptance that postmodern thinking wants to apply across all individuals, they're, very skeptical of claims, but they also believe that all groups need to be accepted. And so when they look at the church, because they only see a church full of love or a church full of judgment, we are forsaking the image of God's holiness.
Yeah, I don't think they even see that. They don't care anymore. They don't even care. When they do see love in a church, they're blown away. They're like, no, this person, we'll have, later in class, we'll show some testimonies from people that are amazing. Somebody go to Psalm 89, verse 14 while I'm talking for a minute. What I'm getting at is this whole idea of loving people is you're not able to. Again, it's another thing where we think we need to love people. You can't. It's not possible. Because when you look at the definition of agape love, it's supernatural. You can't do it as a person. You can't literally decide to love someone without knowing them. You literally can't decide that you're going to go ahead and want their best, even when they want your worst. We don't do that. We remember when they hurt us, right? So agape love is completely different. The only way agape love is going to affect a culture is if the one who is agape love lives in us. And that one is the one talking to people, not you. You can try as hard as you want, but you know something's going to happen. Get you ticked off, something's going to come, or you're going to stop. Only God is able to change a heart through his love, because he is love. We're not. We are not love. There's not a person in the church who is love. It's crazy. This is this whole idea of letting him reign in your life. Right? So, who's got Psalm 89:14? Go ahead.
Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Mercy and truth go before your face.
Okay, so here's a picture of the God of the Old Testament. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of his kingdom, his throne. What goes before his face? Mercy. Isn't that crazy? With truth. So how is it possible to execute mercy by holding to justice? No judge in our court system does that. You have to apply the law. The only way a judge, if he wants to, but he or she really admits it, is the length of the sentence can vary a little. But the law has to be applied. How is God able to pull off a foundation of being just and right all the time, while still refusing to give up mercy? How does he do it? Say it louder.
Jesus.
It's the same thing all the time. It's always back to this guy. How does he ensure that he's now completely satisfied that justice has been done? All right, so what does that mean? So?
He paid the bill.
So? Why can't I do that? Why can't Phil do it?
We're not perfect.
Okay, it has to be God. You see, nothing can satisfy God unless God does it. There's no other way. It's impossible. In order for God to be satisfied, to have his justice satisfied, God has to satisfy it. Just let this sink in a minute. In every other religious worldview, you try like crazy to satisfy God's justice. Riding around on bicycles, flying in the World Trade Center in the buildings, you name it, right? Except Christianity. The only way God can satisfy his justice, if the foundation of his throne is justice and righteousness, his throne is useless if he can't satisfy that. If he depends on people to do it for him. So he doesn't. Now his foundation is satisfied. And because his foundation is satisfied, because he took care of it, now mercy can go before his face. Because he's satisfied. Now he can look at you and say, I paid for that. Do you want in? If you do, you can come in. This is what our culture should be talking about. Is, when we're fighting over this nonsense, I would ask Professor Bridges, what do you think of Jesus Christ? What do you think of him? He sounded pretty direct. He said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. That's it. There's one way. What do you think? Well, that's nuts. That's what she'd say. No, that's not true. And she'd come back with, well, what is going to happen to all those Muslims? Or what's going to happen to all those people in Bangladesh? And all these questions. Like, time out. Are you telling me then you don't believe what Jesus said? He's wrong. This is the foundation we have in our country. Our culture is saying Jesus is wrong. You got to understand who you're dealing with here when you're talking to people. Just ask them, how do you see Jesus Christ? He's a great teacher, pretty smart guy. It's amazing some of the things, but he's wrong.